Hello, my Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday. Sorry. I know. I am sitting here looking at the screen. I'm going, oh, I forgot my necklace. So anyways, I should have been doing this all last week and this week, but I didn't, and I waited until the middle of the show to say it. But first of all, trigger alert, okay, because we're talking about, suicide and suicide prevention month. But also, I am not a licensed therapist. I'm not a trained therapist. This is all my perspective, and a lot of it's done through research. A lot of it is done through people I have known, and a lot of it is my own experiences. So both my own and people in my life that this has happened to. So today I'm going to talk about something a little closer to home for me. And yesterday I talked about veterans and their mental health and the suicide rate amongst veterans. And I want to remind everybody that in 2023, 49,315 people in the United States alone took their own lives. Almost 8,900 of those people were veterans. Okay, so that's 18% of the suicides were veterans, and they only make up about 7.6% of the population of the United States. So that says a lot. We have to do better. We have to be better with people who have PTSD. That was basically the talk yesterday, was PTSD. Today, I'm going to share my perspective on CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, I went over a bunch of different things yesterday about PTSD, and I'm going to probably refer back to them again today, as CPTSD is just the complex version of that. And what they mean by the complex version of that is, to be honest with you, warfare is obviously a long, drawn-out thing, but it's talking too about people who have been in prolonged traumatic experiences. It could be, let's see. CPTSD is often associated with prolonged chronic trauma in childhood, but adults who experience chronic trauma can also develop the condition. So yesterday we talked about PTSD, and I'm going to do a refresher on this one. Mental and behavioral disorder that develops from experience of traumatic events such as warfare, sexual assault, traffic collision, child abuse, domestic violence, or other threats on a person's life or well-being. From tethered.com, from tethered to PTSD.com, the triggers were intrusion or re-experiencing, which is recurrent intrusive memories, flashbacks, traumatic nightmares. Persistent. Gosh, I'm sorry. I just need to, I'm a little nervous about today's topic because I'm gonna share a little bit about my own experiences. So, which I did a little bit last week, but I'm gonna kind of go into the hows and the whys, which I did mention last week I would do when I did this particular subject. So forgive me. My anxiety's a little ramped up a little bit. So persistent avoidance of stimuli. So avoiding trauma-related thoughts and feelings and or objects, people or places associated with the trauma. Negative alterations in cognitions and moods. So distorted beliefs about oneself or the world. Persistent shame or guilt. Emotional numbing. Feelings of alienation. Inability to recall key details of the trauma. And marked alterations in arousal and reactivity. So irritability, sleep disturbance, hypervigilance, difficulty concentrating, reckless behavior. Now, the hypervigilance, as we saw through the combat hypervigilance, is a type of situational awareness, and it can have severe negative consequences on social interactions and self-confidence. So when they talked about emotional numbing under the negative alterations in cognitions and moods, that can lead to substance abuse. So, because you're numbing this memory, you're numbing this pain. And it's not just people who have gone through warfare. So PTSD it kind of covers, I think, a different area. Now, I don't know who came up with complex, post-traumatic stress disorder. it is a fairly new term to me. I'm pretty sure it's a fairly new term, period. But today I do want to talk about CPTSD. In fact, I was watching the news this morning, and one of the things they reminded me of, and it was something that I didn't even dedicate a whole lot of time to, but I will in this particular segment because I believe it fits right in here, is teenage bullying. Teenage bullying, I know we covered it a little bit last week when I was talking about it, but on the first day when we talked about risk factors, and then the next day we talked about warning signs. But online bullying, social media can really kind of distort a young person's view of themselves. I mean, imagine if you're an adult and you're looking at this stuff and you start feeling inadequate. And we all know what it was like being a teenager. We get a little angsty. We get, our hormones are learning, hormones are going everywhere. They're starting to rage. And we're just learning about this stuff as we move towards adulthood. So it's like, you're trying to find this balance. You're trying to find this even keel of, how to handle your hormones. And trust me when I say this, okay? Last week was like, my hormones were on fire. PMS, and then, the following event, and I'm not a teenager anymore. So, and sometimes we get these mood swings. So, but imagine you're a teenager again. It's like these feelings are on steroids. Now, add social media to the mix. When I was growing up, we didn't have social media. I went to school. If I got bullied, I could go home to my safe space where my parents were, and, some of my neighborhood friends were. And we had that. But nowadays, kids go home, they get on social media, and it can continue there. You find out about these kids who bully these other kids, which led to one particular, teenagers or child's, taking their own life. And, they find out they made fake accounts to bully this person. And then they say, well, it was just, and some people explain away, well, they're just kids being kids. No. They're not kids being kids. They're assholes. And I'm sorry when I say that, but bullies have no place in our society. Period. I don't care if you're a kid, if you're a teenager, or if you're a should know better adult. There is no place for that here. Because it doesn't take much to be kind, right? It doesn't take a lot. It does not. But I wanted to add that in the beginning because, there is a risk of suicide among kids who are getting bullied. And, there's no real set number because a lot of people don't know until later after the investigation. So, there's really no set number. But I remember I did a show a while back, and I believe that I think it was 25%, because I remember saying it was a quarter of the users on Instagram felt bullied or were being bullied. That's a lot of people, and most of them were teenagers. Okay, there's a lot of people on Instagram and even Twitter and Facebook, and there are like gazillions of users, especially on Instagram. And we got to remember, not everybody posts the hard parts. Some people do. Some people share the hard parts because they know it's going to help someone else and they're willing to show that part of themselves. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing if people don't. Some people just want, to say, hey, look, I did fun stuff today. And maybe their life is harder for them off of the Instagram. So not the Instagram like the Facebook, but off of the Instagram app than it is in where they can just post the nice things that happened to them that day, that something they can look back on and feel good about, whatever might be happening in their life, so they can get lost in it. But also that doesn't help. Sometimes we have to reach out for help. We have to reach out, get that professional help that is required. If somebody berates you because they say, oh, you got to be stronger than that, you listen to yourself. If you need the help, pursue it. You don't have to tell anyone else. Sometimes it takes us a while to find the right support groups. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right people who will support us. It could even be as small as one person. My support group started with one single person, and I've been giving her kudos the whole time I've been doing this. And And that's older sibling. And my mom was the one that told me, you have to be stronger than that. Now, I think one of the reasons I struggled this weekend, and I'm going to be honest since we're talking about it on this subject, I did get some pretty dark thoughts this weekend. And I came about that close to ideation. But I thought, no. I said, no, that's not me anymore. I can handle this. I have the tools. It's like the voice of my therapist, just kind of popped up in my head and said, Shelly Marie, you have the tools. You can do this. Because the first thing I thought is, oh my God, I'm not in therapy anymore. And then all of a sudden I realized, okay, I have the tools. This is what she's been trying to tell me. I have to utilize these tools. So there's still some triggers that I get that I need to learn how to let go of, that I need to learn how to, move into my new normal of mental health and just learn how to apply them, because my therapist knew I can do it. Now I have to believe in myself. So again, I'm going to read this again. CPTSD is often associated with prolonged chronic trauma in childhood, but adults who experience chronic trauma can also develop the condition. So I'm going to read through this and then I'm going to go over it, okay? So, anxiety, flashbacks or nightmares, avoiding situations, places, and other things related to the traumatic event, heightened emotional responses such as impulsivity or aggressiveness, persistent difficulties in staying in relationships. Examples of chronic trauma include long-term child physical or sexual abuse, long-term domestic violence, being a victim of human or sex trafficking, war, frequent community violence. So, also, just so you know, I got this from the clevelandclinic.org if you want to look this up. But experts haven't quite landed on the same page of whether it is an actual condition, disease, or associated with other mental health issues. But remember, for decades, even now, the idea of mental health is stigmatized. So at least it's in the conversation. So I think that's what I wrote. Apparently not very eloquently, but I think they were supposed to be notes. But again, experts haven't landed on whether or not this is an actual thing or if it's just tied into mental health. But I think the reason they were trying to separate it was because, again, we have generally used the term PTSD for warfare. All right. So yesterday was PTSD and we're talking about veterans' mental health. You saw in the first part, you saw a lot of the same things being reiterated from the PTSD thing, like avoiding situations, places, and other things related to the traumatic events, heightened emotional responses such as impulsivity or aggressiveness, persistent difficulties. Well, we didn't talk about persistent difficulties in staying in relationships. So plus you had the anxiety, the flashbacks or nightmares. And those were also very similar to the PTSD. But in my perspective, I think the CPTSD was kind of to help recognize, and this is just my opinion, okay, this is just my perspective. I feel like it was created. Good morning, Terrence. Good morning, older sibling. I feel like CPTSD was given the moniker it was given simply because there are people who find it hard to disassociate PTSD with just warfare. Okay, so complex post-traumatic stress syndrome, it can, be affected by war. Now imagine though, PTSD we usually, again, I'm going to go back through this. PTSD we usually associate with a military campaign through war. Now, CPTSD could be the other end of that. People living in these war-torn countries, a lot of military people rotate in and out, but you still have the people that live there. You still have the people that have to deal with this every day. And, it can radicalize people. I'm just saying it can radicalize people, but it can also just cause a lot of stress syndromes to the point that if they are able to escape and migrate to another country, they talk about frequent community violence. Think about a lot of the people that are coming to our borders nowadays. Imagine what it must be like in their country for them to feel that walking hundreds or thousands of miles is better than living where they live. I'm not going to comment on that whole situation. I'm just saying, put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself, what must it be like there that they would take this long journey? I don't even like walking to the trash can. okay? Because it's, not right outside my door. I live in a condo, so it is not right outside my door. But, and, that's obviously being lazy. But imagine something being so bad that, if it was so bad that, they walk here. Maybe they're trying to get to Canada. Who knows? But whatever that is, that's just a conversation for another day. But the other things with CPTSD, they talked about trauma in childhood. It could have been physical abuse by a parent, a neighbor, a family member. It's just, sadly, the options are far too much. But, and it can cause certain things. So I said I was going to open myself up, and I'm going to use myself as an example, okay? Because I know my story the best, and I can speak to my story the best. So I might refer in other directions from time to time, but this is a little difficult for me. And I know that I've shared in the past, but it's never been easy because you're kind of putting something out there and you're putting yourself out there to be judged. And I'm at the point now where I just don't care. If you want to judge me and you don't want to like me, that's your loss. Okay. And that's not being narcissistic. That's not being egotistical. It's just, I have enough people in my life that remind me that they're glad I'm here, that they're glad I exist on this planet. And I feel the same way about them. But that's self-love. That's self-confidence. That's me learning my self-confidence and really kind of becoming more in tune with my self-love. And remember, self-love isn't narcissism. Self-love is reminding yourself that you do belong on this planet, that you do deserve to be here, you deserve wonderful things. You deserve great things. And to be honest with you, a lot of people who have suffered from CSA, which is childhood sexual abuse, have found the difficulty in that. Children who have suffered from childhood physical abuse have found the difficulty in that. People, and I won't just say women, because men have been on the receiving end of domestic violence, all right? So men and women, or however you identify, if you're in a prolonged domestic violence situation, that's going to cause a lot of damage. You're going to think you're not worthy. You're going to think you're not lovable. You're going to feel ashamed. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to question yourself all the time. Other people ask me why I'm still dealing with this, but I stayed because I thought they would change. I thought it would end. I thought it would be over with. Sometimes the other person who is the perpetrator of the violence makes it hard for people to leave. They isolate them. They do bad things. And it's kind of like grooming when you're a child. So one of the things my parents always asked me, why didn't you say anything? Now, it started when I was younger than the talk I was given. When I went into school, okay, even all the way back then, because even back then, it's like you started hearing about all these kids, right, getting kidnapped. And it was just kind of, it was right before Adam Walsh was kidnapped. That happened, I think, a couple years after I started school. But your parents always worry. And, so they just tell you these things because, and I think part of it is just maybe their insecurity as well, because they're sending you off into the world now. Your little baby is going into school, and you know what happens from there? They grow up, right? Or we hope they grow up. So, I received the talk when I was 5. If anybody is inappropriate with you, if anybody hurts you, if anybody this, that, or the other, you need to tell us. Okay. But my problem started when I was 4 and I was groomed. So it's just kind of like, okay. But my groomer, there's only a certain select people that I've ever told who it is or who it was. I should say who it was. But, for people that know the math, they probably put it together. But there were actually 2. One when I was a little older. Both of them have since passed on. But it's not something I plan on sharing here. It's not something I ever plan on sharing publicly. Even if I write a book about it, it's not something I plan on sharing publicly because I don't think that's the important part. It's something for me to know. It's something for the select people around me to know that have helped me through a lot of this pain. But it went on for years. At first, when I was little, The grooming began with, well, don't say anything. This is our little secret. But then as you get older, and of course when my parents talk to me, I'm all like, well, it's wrong, so I'm going to tell. Well, you can't tell them because, they'll be mad at me. They'll make me they'll never allow me to come around you again. All these different lies, right? Because they were afraid. They were afraid of being caught. So then you ask yourself, well, why didn't you say something when you were older? Well, when I got older, it was kind of like, well, I'm going to say something because this isn't right. It's like, don't touch me, don't blah, blah, blah. Well, if you say anything to them, they're going to think you're lying and they're not going to love you anymore because they're going to ask you, why did it take you so long to say something? And they used all my fears against me. But that's what grooming is. They groom you to trust them, and then they groom you in a way to isolate you from the truth of everybody else. That's what narcissists do. And that's what this person was. Their ego got in the way. They needed to be domineering over somebody. And unfortunately, I was the victim. I'm hopeful and grateful it didn't happen to anybody else around me that I know of. But, it's something I had to carry for a long time. And after they passed away, I never said a word. I thought, okay, this is over. It's done with. And I'm okay. But it wasn't okay. Because you see, all these negative little tiny killer weeds were inside of me. And they were choking the hell out of my soul. I just, I don't know how else to put that, but they were choking the hell out of my soul. It was bad. It was terrible. And it was icky and gross and ugly. And when I look back on it, when I first kind of opened up, I opened up during a class in high school, and it was, if anybody that is going through this, don't be afraid to speak up. And I couldn't help it. After years of holding it in and bottling it in, my tears just started coming out. And so the student in front of me turned around because they could hear me crying. And they just kind of alerted the teacher, I think Shelly knows somebody. So my teacher said, do you? And I nodded. I said, yes, I know somebody. So, she handled it very well. She, took me outside and took me far away from the class so nobody could hear. And she just whispered to me, is it you or is it someone else? And I just cried and told her it was me. But I said, it's been a while since that's happened. But she just hugged me. And, she brought me to the counselor's office. They called my mom. They said, Shelly Marie might benefit from therapy. My mom was very old school. My mom was raised in a different mindset about mental health. My mom also had a family member that struggled with mental health and took their own life. And, she always says, I don't know why people, kill themselves over a woman. But there was obviously more to it than that. There was something going on in there that just triggered, and that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, I never got the therapy I needed. When I got older, when in my later teens, somebody tried it again. But this time after, being inappropriately touched. I'm trying to put this delicately, but there's no other way to say that. Finally, one day, they woke me up out of a sleep, and it was somebody nearby that just had access to the house. And I was like, if you touch me again, I'm going to tell somebody. And they immediately left. Nobody ever knew they were there. So, it's just kind of like, watch who you allow access to your own home. All right. So, now, when I got older, when the thing did happen at school, I told my mom. We didn't tell my dad at first, but eventually we did tell my dad, and he was furious. And, but I'll be honest with you, it felt comforting to know that my parents had my back and that they believed me, because then it just made all the lies that I was told growing up disappear. Now, here's a trigger alert. Okay, this is a trigger warning. I'm not going to go into details, but the worst you can imagine in the abuse was all that happened. everything that happened. Okay, I was being treated like a tiny adult. And, eventually you just kind of give up and you think, okay, well, this is my life now. And then you feel like when it's all over, when this person is just gone out of your life, when they leave your life and they're just nowhere to be found anymore, they're just scooted off, moved on, you start to second guess yourself. Now, in here where it says persistent difficulties in staying in relationships, I think for me, the difficulties in staying in a relationship was the fact that if you winked at me, all of a sudden I think I was in love, because that's what I equated to love. And I would work really, really hard. I would be with people that I probably shouldn't have been with, that were just, kind of messed up like myself. And, I just, you think you know what you're doing. And all you want to do is be loved, because you equate sex with love. That was me. Anyways, from my perspective, this is what happened for me. It's like, oh, well, if they want to have sex with me, then they must love me. Now, I was not promiscuous by any stretch of the imagination, but I also don't want people to judge people who are, because they may have this background. I mean, some people just like sex. There's nothing wrong with that. Practice safe sex, you're going to be okay, right? I mean, there's a whole industry about it. But there's also people who are promiscuous because they equate it to love. And they think, well, I have to do this with somebody because then they'll love me. And then when it doesn't work out, you're even more devastated. And then you feel even more inadequate. Then you feel even more stupid for making that decision. I will admit, I've been single for a ridiculously long time. But while I complain about that, I think for a long time, it was what was right for me. Because it has taken me this long to realize that in that state of mind, I would have never been in a healthy relationship. Because I'm a recovering people pleaser. Everything they wanted, I would do for them, until basically your soul is so vacant, you don't even love yourself anymore. Or maybe you never did. I mean, I didn't discover self-love until my late 40s. And I'm being very honest about that. And when I mean self-love, it's like I didn't see myself. I didn't appreciate myself. I didn't value myself. My value was held in the hands of whoever, I paid attention to, whoever paid attention to me, whoever was in a relationship with me. And that doesn't make them bad. Sometimes I think when, you can't fix yourself, you attach yourself to people who you think you can fix. People who you perceive to be flawed in your own eyes, because you can't fix your own internal stuff. And I couldn't fix my own internal stuff. I was a hot mess, but I didn't want to admit it, because you have to be stronger than that. So in my last relationship I was in, I was having some violent outbursts, not at anybody, just the walls. Okay. And one time I hit the wall so hard that a picture I had hung fell down. Now, I'm not the greatest picture hanger in the world. Okay. But I mean, that thing had been through a couple earthquakes and never fell, but I punched the wall so hard. I'm surprised I didn't break the drywall. And this time, my boyfriend at the time was home, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm all like, "I don't think so." He's like, "Well, maybe you need to see a therapist." That was the first time somebody ever said that to me. And I thought, God, I never really thought about that. But this is someone that I was in love with, who I truly believe was in love with me at the time. And so I did. And he told me, "Shelly Marie, this is the first time you're coming to a professional. Have you talked to anybody else about this?" "No, just the counselor, just the teacher, and just my parents." He's all, "This is why. You have pushed down this anger and this pain and this sadness and this fear and all the other complex emotions that go with it. And they are now springboarding to the top. And they're coming out in little punches to the wall, or punches to, whatever might be in front of me, that not a human, okay? I want to make that very clear, not a human, but even sometimes a pillar. Sometimes I would just be in bed, I would just start vibrating with anger. And then I would just hit a pillow really hard. So that's your anger coming out, because it needs to be healed. And boy, it was like the world was lifted off my shoulders. But even then, I said, "Oh, well, he didn't share names, but he said, I have patients who have been through this, that, and the other." And he asked me, "Have you?" And I think he was trying to help relate me, but honestly, I had blocked those memories. It wasn't until I was older and I had a therapist. I had a friend who was a therapist that was kind of practicing on me because she was going to deal with people who had been through my situation. Okay. And we unlocked some stuff. And she's like, well, how does this make you feel? How did that make you feel? And all of a sudden, I just started crying. And she's like, what's wrong? And I said, is it possible to lock away memories until you're ready to heal it? Because we'd healed a little bit. And she's all, well, yeah. She's all, that's common. It's commonplace because that's how it's survival mode. It's what she called it. She's all, that's survival mode. She's all, otherwise you just fall apart. And all these different things that happened to me in my life, my first boyfriend, and kind of when I thought I lost my virginity, which had already apparently, trigger alert, been taken by my perpetrator, and the way he started treating me, all of it started to make sense. And I cried for about 10 minutes. And she's like, it's okay. She's like, it's okay. She's like, you're getting it out. You know now. So now you know what to heal. And we kind of just stopped talking about it at that point. She left it alone. She didn't want to push me any farther because this was something new to me. And then I opened up to older sibling about it and talked to her about it at home after probably, it was a while before I opened up to her and talked to her, because all of a sudden I had this shame and guilt. What happened to me was not my fault. What happened to you who might be out there suffering from CPTSD or even PTSD was not your fault. People groom people for a reason. People, make you feel inadequate or put you down or whatever for a reason. If you're dealing with a bully, that's abuse. It's somebody trying to make themselves feel better about themselves. And Eileen brought up a good comment last week. She's all, when people are that bad to other people, imagine what it might be like at home. And that's true. It may not always be like that at home, right? They may have a really good home life, but there's just something in them that does it. But I would say, in my perspective, the majority of the time, people that attack other people, there's probably something happening at home. Which, also explained my outbursts, my verbal outbursts. Now, I did tell my mom, hey, I went to a therapist. He diagnosed me with depression, which makes sense because, all this other, it made everything in my teens and up to that moment make sense. My mom, who came from a different generation, looked at me and says, we do not talk about this in public. We're at home, Mom. We do not talk about this in front of family. We'll talk about this later. When we tried to talk about it later, it was, I don't raise weak babies. I didn't raise a weak child. I raised you to be strong. And that, she's all, you just need to fight this. You need to not worry about it. You don't need professional help. All the wrong things to say. But because my mom and I had finally found really good footing in our relationship, I was so afraid to go against what she said because I just wanted to stay in that good place where we were at. So I trusted what she said. And boy, she was wrong. And that she was wrong about something else that I've also talked about and covered in other shows. And both times she said, don't tell your father. My father was actually hurt by that. We have talked, like I said, a couple shows ago, we talked about this. And he's like, I'm just really hurt that you didn't come to me. Because I used to tell my dad everything growing up. He's not religious. I didn't have the Bible thrown at me every time I brought something up. My dad and I used to always be very in tune with one another when I was growing up. And I think we have that relationship again now, but, or I feel like we do, but he was hurt and I can see why. And he admitted, he's all, I don't know how I would have reacted, but I probably would have tried to react better. Cause he usually was. My dad tried to always step out of the situation, put himself in it and just kind of say, hey, okay, and so, but I don't blame my mom anymore. The anger has gone. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think it put me on the track that I needed to be on. Maybe that was part of my journey, was realizing that even in my older age, that no matter how old you are, there is always room for healing. There is always room to let things go. I have known people who have kept their secrets until they were dying. And, it's kind of like, you have to wonder, did the stress that they had from this build into something? I'm not trying to put the woo-woo out there, all right? I personally believe if you hold on to things, it can create health problems. And for no other reason than you're putting stress on your body. And when you put stress on your body, everything goes out of whack. That's why a lot of people that go with the flow, right? Some of them are just healthy. And even if they die young, as my father would say, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And I think that's a really healthy, solid way to look at it. When it's your time to go, it's your time to go. So, live life like, live it. Just live it. Live life. That's the point, right? That's why we talk about things like CPTSD. That's why we talk about things like PTSD. That is why there is a Suicide Awareness Month. Because there are so many cultures, there are so many different family members in people's families who are struggling, but they come from certain minded people that just say, no, you have to be stronger. And maybe that's their own fear. When I got older and I healed a lot of this stuff, especially in recent years, I realized that where my mom was coming from was probably a place of fear. This is a woman who had to put me through heart surgery when I was 3 years old, who sat with me even when it was so traumatic on my parents to see this little baby, 3-year-old toddler, hooked up to wires with, her chest split open. Well, obviously it was closed by then, but you know what I mean. And I think there was always just this fear, so they become the mama bear, they become the papa bear, they become very protective. And I was lucky to have that. Not everybody is. My parents kept me on this side of being a statistic. I know I've had near attempts. I know I've come this close and the divine intervention thing happened. And whether you want to believe it or not, I know what happened to me. And I know that the 2 times that I came really, really close to just, not ideation, going through the attempt, it was stopped. And the things that followed after that was just kind of like mind-blowing. So I knew someone was trying to tell me it is not your time yet. It's got to be hard for my spirit guide, my guardian angel, to keep up with me sometimes. But there was anxiety. I had flashbacks for a while, especially when the new blocked information came back up to finally be healed. And it came, those nightmares and those flashbacks came with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And, sometimes I wonder if that's why I'm not a parent. I've always said, well, I didn't find the right person, or I didn't find this. I wonder if it was my own fear. All the bad things that happened to me that I was afraid, I don't think it would have happened to the next person because, it would have just been something that you really you'll know the signs, you can see the signs, generally. Not always. I was very good at hiding my signs because, like I said, I was groomed very young. And, my parents felt guilty. So see, I wasn't the only victim in this. My parents were too. They felt guilty. How could this happen? How could we not know? And I've told my dad over and over, and I told my mom when she was still alive, it's like, I was really good at hiding it. It's like I came out of the womb, I came out of the womb an Oscar winner. So, you just get good at hiding it. And no, it's not funny. That's just my anxiety going, oh my God. So there are that, you do try to avoid situations. You do try to avoid people that kind of trigger you. You do have those heightened emotional responses where you get angry. And this is why we need to end the stigma on all these things. On the domestic abuse, the CPTSD that comes with domestic abuse, that comes with child sexual abuse, that comes with any type of physical abuse or verbal abuse. Verbal abuse can be really horrible because those leave internal scars. Those leave people with big time triggers, right? I said something to someone one time and they were triggered so hard, and it turns out this was something that was said to them as they were growing up, and it was just a word, but it was used so much that it was a trigger for them, and I didn't know this, and I was kind of like, I am so sorry. We hugged it out, and it's like, I am really sorry. I had no idea. And that's when I got my first insight into this person's, upbringing. It's kind of like, whoa. How did I not know all this? And it's like, I've been through things, but how did I not know this? How did I not see the signs? That's why we have the warning signs. That's why we have the risk factors. That's why we talk about PTSD and CPTSD, because we want people to get the help that they need. We don't want to stigmatize them. We don't want to make them feel bad. We want to show them there is a better way. In 2017, I did 6 months of very intensive therapy that covered everything I just talked about. In 2022, no, the beginning of 2023, I went on my 50th birthday was my intake appointment for therapy. And I thought, you know what? I have to figure out this balance. I have to figure out how to move forward from all this. The next year and a half, my therapist and I worked on it. She reminded me of the tools I have. She reminded me of my strengths. She reminded me that, Shelly Marie, you got to stop living in the past. Sometimes it's okay to look back to see how far you've come. You know, to tell yourself, hey, I did this. But, or to see, you know, and she says sometimes the past will sneak up and it might be something else that you have to heal, but you cannot live there anymore. You cannot live there anymore. And I learned that from a person who is a professional, from a person who did not stigmatize me when I walked in. Both of them, my last two therapists were the most fabulous people on the planet when it came to my mental health. They talked to me. They, you know, established a rapport with me. A lot of times the rapport was so comfortable that sometimes, you know, we'd get into personal stuff, no names, no nothing, just, hey, how are you doing? You know, just to feel comfortable. But I think that's also a testament to our own healing when we open up and allow people in. You know, I mean, yeah, I'm older, but I still think that, you know, a very healthy relationship is out there for me. Whenever it arrives, it arrives. But I've also learned that, you know, I've also learned not to place my value in someone else's hand. If they love me back, if they respect me back, that's wonderful. That's the bonus. But self-love is where it all has to really start. We have to love ourselves. We cannot go out there and try to fix other people. I have tried to do that. I've overstepped, and then I realized, oh, this is about me. This is something I need to heal. This is something I need to do. And that's what we need to do for one another. We need to end the stigma. When we end the stigma, we can save lives. When we encourage people to go to seek professional help, whether it's, you know, on their computer at home, talking to a doctor, on the phone, on text, whatever, there's apps out there, or if it's just in person with someone in the room with you physically, we need to show people that it's okay. It doesn't make you weak. Seeking professional help is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And it took the strength of 1,000 Shelly Maries to do it, because I had spent years stigmatizing myself, and I will not do it anymore. And if I can save just one life, hopefully more, if all of us who advocate for mental health can, that's a win. That's a win. That's somebody whose family still has them, or their friends, or whoever their loved ones are. So let's be better. Let's be better with one another. Let's love one another. It doesn't take much to be kind. It doesn't take much to be kind at all. Yesterday I had a very wonderful moment. I'm gonna end it on this. And it just goes to show how kindness really is free, and kindness can be anywhere. Sibling and I were having coffee with a friend yesterday, and we're in the Starbucks. And the woman says, you know, she calls out my name, Shelly Marie. And all of a sudden, it's like I start standing up and I see this woman, and she's just smiling at me, like toothy smile, like, oh. And when I get to the counter, she's still kind of looking at me. So she just says, is that your full name? And I'm all, yes. I said, little M. I said, it's one word, little M. You know, obviously channeling my mother. But I'm all, yeah, little M, blah, blah, blah. And she says, it's beautiful. And I said, well, my dad named me. And so, you know, and in that moment, I could have walked away. But her vibe was so amazing. And I needed a mommy hug. And that's not to say other people don't give good hugs. Sibling gives great hugs, okay? But in that moment, something just said, ask her for a hug. So I just told her, I said, I know this is going to sound weird. And I kind of used my name as I said, it's very rare when people compliment my name. And I said, it's made me kind of giddy. Can I hug you? Absolutely. She gave me the tightest, warmest hug. And they felt like my mom's hugs. And I figured maybe just, I'm trying not to cry because my makeup's looking pretty decent today. But I thought, you know what? My mom put me in that situation. Maybe that was her way of saying, I see you now, I understand you, and I'm going to do whatever I can to guide you. And, maybe it's her way of saying, I'm sorry that I stood in your way for all those years. And really, she didn't. That's why I'm saying, whatever is best for us, we have to make those decisions. Do not put your value in somebody else's hands. If you feel like you need that professional help, get it. There are ways to do it privately. No one has to know. No one has to know. All right? But we need to end the stigma of this so that people aren't afraid to talk to their family. So people who do talk to family members that don't understand mental health understand that it's just not, oh, you have depression, you're going to die. No, that's not how it works. That is not how it works at all. I have depression. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with a chemical imbalance. This is my life. I have a dinged up mental health. I have my good days outnumber my bad days, and that's what's important. All right. So I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so, so much for watching. Please, please, please take care of yourselves. Okay. Just give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace and have a wonderful day.